Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we are finally going to review the newest album from Alex Cameron called Forced Witness. So I'm not sure there's an easy way to begin this review, because to do so I need to explain Alex Cameron as an artist and the high wire act he's walked throughout his career over the past decade. And I'm not sure there's a way to do that without feeling like I'm walking through a hall of mirrors. Now don't get me wrong, I like it when artists make art that is commenting on the artistic process or deconstructing the entertainment industry, but it's also the sort of Ouroboros, Charlie Kaufman-esque approach that can get a little bit exhausting for a lot of the audience, especially in the mainstream. So let's lay some groundwork. Alex Cameron got his start in the electronic group CK, but in the 2010s began developing his solo act, and the persona that he initially adopted was that of a failed performer, but not exactly one that was fully self-aware that he had failed, and infused some of the 80s inspired alpha male machismo and cool to boot. Now much of his debut, Jumping the Shark, was infused with this sort of character, balancing out some really wonky electronics with slick touches of 80s synth pop, actively taking the piss out of any sense of cool this character might have, but also playing it just straight enough to reclaim a little bit for his cult audience. Now from there he developed a lot of relationships with indie bands with a flair for retro grandiosity like him, like Foxygen, Unknown Mortal Orchestra, and even Brandon Flowers of The Killers, which got him a record deal with Secretly Canadian and a few writing credits behind their last album, and really they were good writing credits as a sort of spark that The Killers needed. And yet with this persona, it also led to a collaboration with fellow Australian musician Kieran J. Callanan on a little song called Big Enough on his record I reviewed this year called Bravado, which took his cult status and fused it with a meme, and his popularity got considerably bigger. And also considering on his new album, he was looking to explore some similar themes of masculinity that Callanan had touched on, and roped in both Brandon Flowers and Angel Olsen of all people to support him. This was a record that I had to hear, even despite, yet again, I'm getting to this entirely too late. But hey, was it worth it? Yeah, this was definitely worth a lot of listens. I had a ton of fun with this. But at the same time, I'm not gonna really blame myself or really anybody else for this flying under the wire for a while, especially in an era where the 80s pastiche is increasingly common, even in the mainstream these days. But at the same time, there's so much more to it than that, with Alex Cameron looking to split the difference between the wit and flair of a Father John Misty and the irrepressible soft rock pop electronic sensibilities that came with Kieran J. Callanan. Merely a pretty damn good pop record on the surface, but dig deeper and you get a smartly layered, amazingly idiosyncratic little project that, yeah, really was a ton of fun. I enjoyed the hell out of this album. And here's the thing. On the surface, you can see why some people might overlook a record like this. Now part of this is Alex Cameron himself, who is a sort of quasi-theatrical, raspy drawl that might not be as strange as Kieran J. Callanan's accent, but it can be a bit of an acquired taste, especially balanced against more immediately recognizable backing vocals from Brandon Flowers. Yeah, he's actually on this album. And when you pair it with some of the production, especially in the vocal lines that feels imported straight from mid-80s soft rock, it's almost too normal to be distinctive, but just weird enough to catch your ear or throw you off guard a little bit. And that balance is quintessential to what Alex Cameron is trying to do, picking tones and sounds that for a huge swath of people, especially an older audience, that sound, it might be, if not safe or comfortable, then at least relatively inoffensive. From the gleaming sophistopop of Candy May and Politics of Love, to the wiry synth funk of Stud Muffin 96, to the touches of sax accented Americana that flesh out Running Out of Luck and True Lies and Stranger's Kiss. Hell, Alex Cameron even goes something close to Latin-infused yacht rock and calypso with the Hacienda. Now, initially, I was a little bit thrown that this album didn't try to rock a little bit harder, go all out. I mean, we do get the occasional guitar solo like on Stud Muffin 96, just to accentuate that hyper-masculine appeal of an album like this, and then you realize, for as much as Alex Cameron might want to emphasize that masculine presence, keeping it a little bit more toned back, placing him much more closer to all the basic guys that want that dream rather than who are actually living it, like those rock gods. Even if there are a few tunes and synth choices I did find maybe a tad too chintzy. And of course, none of it would be possible without rock-solid keyboard hooks with great melodic layering and real groove anchored in these tight staccato bass lines and sequenced drums, accented with deeper guitar tones and that saxophone, so good there. Now, for as much as some might want to dismiss Alex Cameron as a parody or imitator, he's not even close to so many of the forgotten wannabes of that era in the mid-80s. In terms of production balance and composition, this guy is an expert and it shows. And that's when we have to talk about the lyrics lyrics and themes. And that idea of masculinity that Alex Cameron is looking to explore. And you know what, to establish some context, the mid-80s soft rock and Americana scene, it might not have had the over-sexualized bombast that you would see in hair metal, but it's hard not to see many of the attitudes of the time surrounding a man's place in this world translating over to those albums anyway, no matter how often acts like John Mellencamp and Bruce Springsteen tried to subvert them or add more context. And not only does Alex Cameron know this, he's relying upon that cultural construct in the mind's eye in the mind of audiences so he can satirize it and deconstruct it, digging into that hyper-masculine lone wolf archetype that was lionized in 80s pop culture and show both what it would look like nowadays and what it probably looked like then with the benefit of hindsight and context. And framing is key here. Alex Cameron's walking a razor-sharp line between capturing that earnest power of his beefy protagonist, but also then subverting it. A character you might like or even empathize with at points, but feel kind of faintly gross after. And that's before you get into some of the deeper content of these songs. Now, one thing that Alex Cameron utilizes that wasn't really brought into the popular music of the 80s is the internet. That anonymous line of communication to so many women that colors the soured and abusive relationship of Candy May. The porn addiction underpinning both the Chihuahua and True Lies. In the form where he's trying to deaden his feelings after a breakup because breakups don't look good. Heartache doesn't look good. But in the latter case, it's a secret thrill where he doesn't even care the gender of the person sending him such sweet poetry. And then there's Stud Muffin 96, where he's ever so anxiously waiting for the girl he's chatting up online to be of the age of consent. Yeah, and if all this looks a little bit pathetic and creepy and desperate and kind of gross, that's the point. Because all these feelings and emotions are rooted in trying and mostly failing to project masculinity in a world where that definition feels increasingly restrictive and yet increasingly nebulous. It drives the frustrated torment behind the Hacienda, where he goes to a brothel and has some of the best sex of his life and yet can't have the woman look at him while he cries. Or his attempts to get a girl from another guy on Marlon Brando with meat-headed posturing and attacks on his masculinity, even with some homophobic slurs, only to see all that crumble when confronted with this woman and his weak excuses how he can't help it all. It feels all the more flimsy. He even apologizes for those homophobic slurs. And as much as Runnin Outta Luck wants to place him as the stalwart renegade saving the hooker with the heart of gold, you quickly realize that he's reliant on her running out of luck for the connection that he's buying for her. It's got all the sort of sharp insight that Josh Tillman has brought to the table whenever he's talked about gender politics. But like with Kieran J. Callahan, it's not demonizing masculine traits so much as calling out the inflexible insecurities, the overheated machismo, and just plain stupidity for its own sake, and I got no problem with that. But it's also balanced out remarkably well. Stranger's Kiss placed Cameron opposite Angel Olsen, playing exes that are casually sniping and sarcastic. They're going at each other and bragging about finding solace in a stranger, but from the details you can tell that there's a deeper heartache that neither is processing properly. From the lingering emptiness within Cameron, no matter how much he's doing well, to Olsen's bitterness at seeing her own legacy become a meme. Now, these are some damn potent observations, and they feel pretty thematically consistent across a lot of varied situations. Even with Country Figs probably being the weakest tune on the album, it's still a biting indictment of stubborn self-reliance for its own damn sake, which is why I'm a little bit disappointed it doesn't all quite coalesce at the end. Oh, don't get me wrong, Politics of Love is a great synth-pop song that I really did love, but it doesn't quite tie things all together as well as, say, Kieran J. Callahan's Bravado, which really wrapped the album up so much more effectively. But as a whole, this is a remarkably smart, witty, sharply written soft rock record that's ballsy and profane enough to vivisect the genre at its roots, and yet find the swell and power and humor within it all the same. It's sort of an album that, yes, it will have a limited audience. I'm not sure the sound has reached charmingly retro just yet. Might ring as a tad too chintzy for some audiences, and for those paying attention beyond the terrific hooks, this sort of satire and deconstruction can rub some of them the wrong way. But for me, solid 8 out of 10, definitely recommended. Yeah, I know, I got to this one entirely too late, but trust me when I say, it's worth it. Definitely make time, check this out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know, I got to it late, but seriously guys, you want to hear this. I got the link to the album to buy the record in the description below, and I got the poll up there for all you guys to step in and see what you thought about this record. I know, basically, it's the whole thing, a record dealing with toxic masculinity, probably is gonna get all the anti-SJW crew coming in here. Keep in mind, this might be more up your alley than you might think. Just saying. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you guys want to support this channel or get albums onto my schedule, the link to my Patreon is right over there. There are 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. Now, the whole thing with Patreon, it's probably going to end up changing in a little bit because they're doing lots of stupid things. But I will be keeping you guys posted with regards to that. In the meantime, there's your option. Take a look. Beyond that, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.